This object was discovered by the Mars rover on the surface of Mars, and the problem is that it looks way too unusual for an ordinary rock. NASA usually explains such findings very cautiously, but some scientists believe that Mars may be hiding much more than it seems. And this is one of the strangest photographs of Mars that humanity has ever received. In the picture, people noticed an object that looked like the entrance to a cave or tunnel. And if this is really a natural formation, then why does it look so perfect?
How much do you know about Mars? What do you think about when you look at images of its surface? Do you think there's nothing on the red planet except rocks and the same dusty landscapes? However, that's far from the truth. And now, you're already watching a real dust storm somewhere on the horizon. It becomes so powerful that its destructive force covers not just some area, but an entire planet. And Mars can't forget about this storm. After all, it occurs every 5.5 Earth years, or every 3 Martian years. Dust covers absolutely everything with its dense layer and blocks access to sunlight. Why should we care about all this? First of all, if we send our research probes to Mars, they will quickly fail under such conditions. And of course, if we plan to colonize the red planet in the future, we will have to adapt to such conditions. Such massive sandstorms. And at the moment, this would be difficult for us because we don't know why these storms occur at all or why they happen so regularly. But what are the consequences of this? And what should you do to survive during a Martian storm? First of all, it's worth noting that the red planet used to have a different atmosphere, possibly even water. So dust storms of this scale couldn't have happened back then. Over time, Mars became an inhospitable desert planet where the atmospheric layer has essentially eroded away. Now, the atmosphere on Mars is less than 1% of what our planet has. Of course, this is not the only reason why storms have formed on Mars. We can't say for sure yet, but most likely the temperature of the planet turned out to be a pretty significant factor. Since the atmospheric layer was getting thinner, Mars could no longer retain heat as well as it used to, and so the planet started to cool down. Moreover, there are also huge temperature fluctuations on it. It ranges from 27 degrees Celsius during the day to as low as minus 133 degrees at night. Due to the temperature fluctuation, strong winds form on the planet, and for Mars, it's more typical to have dust cycles than anything like rain cycles. How does dust even get into the air? In summer and spring on Mars, so-called dust devils, whirlwinds, form, which redistribute dust particles. When sunlight heats the surface, the air at the very bottom rises up, while the cold air sinks down to fill the void. All this contributes to the formation of spirals in the air, which sometimes reach a height of 8.5 kilometers. As these spirals move, they absorb everything in their path, and they encounter a huge amount of dust, which they then leave behind in the atmosphere. When this happens, the sky on Mars appears much darker, and the dust remains in the atmosphere for a long time. There are other options as well, the most common being wind action. It's quite difficult to move dust in the air on Mars because the particles are electrostatically charged and, let's say, they often stick together, so it's very hard to separate them. To make Martian dust particles move, you need an impulse. It's actually easier for gusts of wind to lift larger particles, even though at first glance that sounds paradoxical. The thing is, larger dust particles don't stick together as much. So, the bigger particles get lifted into the air. They can't stay up for long because they're too big, so they fall back down after traveling only a short distance. When they fall, it creates an impulse that breaks the strong bonds between the smaller dust particles, and now those smaller ones get lifted into the air. There, Mars's gravity is weaker, which means the dust can stay suspended like that for weeks or even months without settling. That's what allows strong and long-lasting storms to form. The dust particles hold on to the heat coming from the sun quite well, and so when the particles heat up, they start releasing the accumulated heat into the atmosphere. And then the warm air rises just like it does with dust devils, but on a much larger scale. This leads to greater salinization of the Martian soil, more dust being lifted, and therefore increased heating of the atmosphere. The result of all this is the formation of a dust storm. If a Martian dust storm rages only in one area, it doesn't pose much of a threat. Usually its speed is about 97 kilometers per hour, while the speed of hurricanes on Earth is half as much again. And because of the thin atmosphere, it's not really that noticeable, and often it can't damage research equipment in any way. However, there are always exceptions. If a dust storm contains a certain amount of slightly sticky electrostatic dust, when it settles, it blocks access to sunlight. And that's very bad for devices that run on solar panels. They simply don't get any energy. The number of problems increases as the storms get bigger. During spring and summer, Mars's southern hemisphere lies within the planet's dust belt,
Марс располагается ближе всего к Солнцу,
which makes it the warmest region on the planet. And during this period, for reasons we still can't explain, dust storms begin to merge into one huge storm. Of course, this could be because they were simply close to each other, but it happens with such surprisingly precise regularity that it's unlikely to be just a coincidence. How do planet-sized storms form on Mars? Scientists still don't have an answer to this question. They occur once every 3 Martian years, and that's not enough to explain it even with Milankovitch cycles. The time intervals there are much longer. There is a theory that this is one of the stages of the dust cycle, but we can't say for sure. Usually, dust storms on Mars last for several days. However, these giant storms can last for weeks, and accordingly, this will negatively affect our research equipment. An important factor here is the aerosol optical depth, which shows how much sunlight is available. This value should be less than 2, so that our equipment can be charged using solar panels. Usually on Mars, this value is 0.5, which is within the normal range. When huge Martian dust storms occur, it fluctuates between 9 and 11, meaning no sunlight gets through at all. This is exactly why the Opportunity rover mission failed, because its solar panels were completely covered with a thick layer of dust. This led to a serious malfunction of the spacecraft. And this doesn't mean that spacecraft with nuclear power sources are safe in this case. Such large-scale storms can simply disrupt communication, which means the spacecraft won't be able to receive signals from Earth. Moreover, even satellites are at risk. Due to the huge amount of heated dust, the atmosphere begins to expand, throwing some of it into orbit, where satellites usually operate. Because of this, they have to change their trajectory, spending a huge amount of energy. Just imagine that you are already colonizing Mars. Solar panels won't help you, and while the dust storm is raging, you most likely won't be able to contact Earth in any way. You need to come up with something that will allow you to be self-sufficient for a certain amount of time. Interestingly, such massive storms actually destroy themselves, as strange as that may sound. That's because they block access to sunlight, which stops the winds that lift dust particles into the air. And so after a while, Mars becomes quiet, inhospitable, and lonely once again. And then it will be covered by a planet-sized storm again. The last one happened in 2018, which means the next one will occur very soon. And what do you think? Will we ever understand the nature of such a phenomenon? And how will we deal with it if we colonize Mars? The starry sky, like a magnet, attracted the attention of our ancestors thousands of years ago. The first prototypes of star maps with some planets and celestial bodies can be found on the walls of ancient caves. Then, cave paintings were replaced by books, which now tell us about people's understanding of the cosmos at that time. As our understanding of the structure of the universe became more advanced, and technology developed by leaps and bounds, we began to discover more and more new worlds in the solar system. And we learned about a considerable number of moons of Jupiter and Saturn, about fairly large planets, and about real icy worlds. And do you know about the hypothetical minor planet called Vulcan? At the beginning of the 19th century, there was a widespread theory that this planet was the closest to the Sun. However, it was later discovered that Vulcan does not actually exist. Some scientists claimed that they saw it through a telescope, but most likely, these were just sunspots. In 1980, it was suggested that there was a star called Nemesis. According to the theory, this star is the main reason for periodic extinctions on Earth, somehow affecting the movement of comets, which would then crash into our planet. However, these are just assumptions that have never been confirmed. Even now, in the modern world full of powerful technologies, we have been tracking a mysterious planet that was supposed to be somewhere near Neptune. And, as expected, we didn't find anything. Let's also remember the hypothetical planet Phaethon, which was supposed to be somewhere between Mars and Jupiter. Let's focus on it in more detail. Why did this object attract so much interest from scientists, and what are the chances that Phaethon actually exists? For a long time, there was something like stagnation in space science, since no new planets were being discovered. However, everything changed in 1781 when William Herschel discovered Uranus, which became the first planet to be discovered in hundreds of years. Other scientists decided not to fall behind and also tried to find a new planet, but it turned out to be very, very difficult. Then the Titius-Bode law came to the rescue, which was supposed to help determine in which part of the solar system a planet might be hiding. According to this law, each planet should be located twice as far from the Sun as the previous one. This formula was applied to the planets of the solar system that had been discovered at that time, and it turned out that in this case there should be another planet between Mars and Jupiter, located at a distance of almost 3 astronomical units from the Sun. And from that moment, a race began among astronomers to find that very missing planet. Everyone wanted to be the one who would discover another object in the solar system. One winter day in 1801, the Italian scientist Giuseppe Piazzi, while observing the starry sky, came across an unknown point that was slowly moving among the stars. At first, the astronomer concluded that this point was a comet. He even managed to give it the name Ceres. However, it was later discovered that it almost perfectly fit Titius-Bode's law. Ceres was clearly smaller than the neighboring planets, but this did not contradict the belief. That is why, at that time, the scientific community was gripped by genuine euphoria, without exaggeration. The newly discovered planet was given planetary symbols. It seemed that all the blanks had been filled, but in reality, things were not that simple. Just a year later, in 1802, another similar object called Pallas was discovered. In 1804, Juno, and in 1807, Vesta. All these objects fit the Titius-Bode law and moved along the same orbit as Ceres. Then, some astronomers came up with the idea that perhaps they had discovered 4 objects of an entirely new class. Nevertheless, for quite a long time, it was believed that there were 11 planets in the solar system: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Vesta, Juno, Ceres, Pallas, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. In 1846, another planet, Neptune, was discovered, and it actually contradicted the Titius-Bode law because its distance from the Sun was 8 astronomical units less than what the formula predicted. Then the scientific community concluded that the Titius-Bode law was irrelevant for the solar system, and it was nothing more than a coincidence. By 1864, discovered objects that were recently considered planets were redesignated as asteroids, and the region of the solar system where they were located was called the asteroid belt. Well, the vanished planet turned out to be untrue, even though it was a very fascinating story from the perspective of both ordinary people and scientists. However, we still have questions. For example, where did this asteroid belt come from? German astronomer Heinrich Wilhelm Olbers proposed a theory that all these asteroids are actually fragments of a planet that once existed. The planet was named Phaethon after the son of the sun god Helios, who rode his chariot across the sky every day. According to the myths, Phaethon's chariot burned up when it came too close to the Earth. Well, The fate of Phaethon and the hypothetical planet is somewhat similar. Olbers suggested that the planet Phaethon was located exactly between Mars and Jupiter, and then for some reason was destroyed. But the question is, what were those reasons? According to the first theory, the planet could have been destroyed by processes happening inside it. The second theory says that another celestial body crashed into Phaethon. The third theory is that it was destroyed by Jupiter's gravitational field when it got too close to the giant planet. And finally, according to the fourth theory, Phaethon was torn into small pieces under the influence of the hypothetical star Nemesis. So, is it true that there was a world that was destroyed long ago but left traces of itself in the solar system? Asteroids. We wouldn't want to disappoint you, but that's unlikely. The fact is, research has shown that the total mass of all the objects discovered in the asteroid belt is only about 1/4 the mass of the moon. That's nowhere near enough to form a planet. So where did the asteroid belt come from in the first place? Now it's believed that it's what's left over from the period when the solar system was forming, 4.5 billion years ago. It's what's left from the accretion disk, a disk of dust and gas that once surrounded the sun. It was from the fragments of the accretion disk that asteroids, comets, and planets with their moons were formed. Thanks to this disk, we know the solar system as it is now. Asteroids can help us learn what the solar system was like in the distant past. You could say that asteroids are a kind of time machine. But what if the mysterious planet Phaethon had existed? What would it have been like? As we already mentioned, it would have been located between Mars and Jupiter, and it would have been the smallest planet in the solar system. Most likely, the hypothetical planet would have been lifeless, with a rocky surface, a very thin atmosphere, and no magnetic field, which also means there would be no protection from particles carried by the solar wind. Yes, the mysterious planet Phaethon never existed, but it left a noticeable mark in history. And of course, it also inspired filmmakers and science fiction writers to create works about space. And what do you think? Will we ever find such a mysterious world? Mars, the red planet. For many years, it has attracted scientists from all over the world who are doing everything possible to learn more about such a mysterious planet. Today we will talk about the Perseverance rover mission and show you the pictures it has taken during its time on Mars. What interesting places are there, what the sky looks like, and what unique things we have been able to see thanks to the rover. The main goal of Perseverance is to study the geology and past climate of the planet, to collect Martian rocks and regolith, as well as to search for ancient microbial life. This is the very first high-resolution color image sent to us by Perseverance after its landing on February 18, 2021. And here is the very moment of the rover's landing. The photo was taken by a camera on board the descent module. And here are the images we received using the Sherlock Watson camera, which is located at the end of a special robotic arm. Here we can take a closer look at the rocks, and the right Mastcam Z camera helps us with that. This is better than space movies. Snapshot. But what does the sky look like on the red planet? Snapshot. Perseverance captured something truly unique with its camera. The sun is eclipsed by Phobos, one of Mars's moons. This is the most extensive high-frequency observation of a Phobos solar eclipse ever made from the surface of Mars. And here, for example, Perseverance is taking a selfie. And here, it's already moving straight ahead. Here you can observe real dust devils, strong winds that formed near Jezero crater on July 20, 2021. What we observe on Mars with Perseverance is a reality that was previously inaccessible to us. And we have no doubt that the rover will prove itself even more. What else interesting do you think we can discover on Mars? And for now, enjoy some more images of the red planet. We talk a lot about the colonization of Mars, which could very well happen in the future. We hear about this not only from scientists, but also in movies, books, and comics. Popular culture doesn't let us forget about it. But what would the colonization of the red planet actually look like in practice? The path to the settlement of Mars is paved by 5 spacecraft that landed on the surface without a crew and delivered the equipment needed to sustain life. A supply of oxygen, water, dry food, fuel, solar panels, medicines, research equipment, and special capsules. Where can people live? The ships land in the Erebus Mountains. One of the ships is equipped with the Starlink communication system. To establish communication on Mars, 4 such satellites are needed since the Martian base will be relatively small in size. Powerful solar panels, in turn, will provide the base with enough energy. After that, we move directly to the stage of building the Martian station. Special dog-like robots from the engineering company Boston Dynamics help with this. All of this is in service of SpaceX and its grand project. The robots will help lay the foundation of the base and install solar panels, a source of much-needed energy. The first thing the rovers do is start searching for water deposits deep beneath the surface. During the engineering work, they search for the necessary elements in the soil and atmosphere, which can be used to synthesize fuel and oxygen. The rovers and robots level a section of the Martian surface to make the landing process easier for the first colonists who are waiting for their turn. At that time, only robots are working on Mars. 2 years and 2 months later, when Mars and Earth are close enough to each other, it's time for people to fly to the red planet. Why does it have to take exactly that much time? We'll explain a bit later. 30 astronauts are sent there on 5 spacecraft. These are the best representatives of the most important fields for colonization: scientists, engineers, medical and military specialists. Another group of ships with everything necessary for normal functioning on the red planet is also sent with them. The astronauts have to live on Mars for a little over 2 years. It may not seem like much, but they have a difficult mission: to make living on Mars at least somewhat comfortable. And accomplishing this, especially at first, is very difficult because the newcomers have to deal with the effects of low gravity. Add to this the harsh climate with an average temperature of minus 63 degrees Celsius and frequent dust storms. Mars also experiences occasional earthquakes. What will the daily routine of the first inhabitants of Mars look like? The bad news is that the length of a day there is a bit longer than on Earth. The good news is that moving heavy loads is easier due to the weaker gravity. Once the preparatory work is finished, it's necessary to start producing cryomethane fuel in order to have the ability to return to Earth.
Топливо, чтобы была возможность вернуться на Землю.
You can't go to Mars at any time. The thing is, the red planet and Earth move along their orbits at different speeds. The optimal time for launch comes when the planets are at their closest distance to each other. This happens once every 2 years and 2 months. Spacecraft wait for exactly this moment to bring astronomers back to Earth. At the same time, new people are already flying to Mars. And when there are more people than robotic devices, the crew will include not only scientists and engineers, but also farmers and architects. They are finally finishing the construction of a large greenhouse system, so there is more Martian greenery at the base. At the same time, they still have to transport a huge amount of food from Earth, but over time, Mars is becoming more and more independent in this regard. AI Space Factory is working at full capacity, planning to use a 3D printer to create housing for settlers. For this, they use real Martian polymer made from plants grown in the laboratory, and they also add samples of Martian soil. The houses will be designed in such a way that radiation does not get inside. Over time, the quality of 3D printing improves, which makes it possible to create more greenhouses and more devices for growing grain and vegetables. The need to transport agricultural crops from Earth is rapidly decreasing. At first, only the scientific community sends anything to the Martian base, and in most cases, these are research instruments. And it was only a matter of time before world-famous companies wanted to enter the Martian market. For example, Blue Origin is an aerospace company owned by Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. It is the company that will be able to organize delivery for private individuals on Mars. Of course, fish are brought to the red planet and placed in special tanks. We've been talking about new opportunities all this time, but life is also full of sad moments. The residents of the base are not immune to accidents, and even the most ordinary natural death will eventually come to the colonists. There will come a time when a funeral is held on Mars for the first time. The best option is to cremate the body. One of the most important years for the colonists is 2035. This is the year of the so-called Great Transition. At that time, the distance between Earth and Mars will be the smallest in history. If previously a spacecraft had to travel from one point to another for about 7 months now, it can be done in 5. The number of settlers is increasing rapidly. The base on Mars can now be considered a city in terms of size, and the first Martian hospital is already being built there. Soon, the population of the colony reaches 1,000 people. Before this, most people were base workers who lived there temporarily. But now, more and more people intend to settle permanently on the red planet. The process of digging underground tunnels as another place to live begins. This becomes another important area of activity on Mars. Such underground structures are considered some of the safest. In addition, small research stations are appearing all over the planet, farther away from the main base. At first, only robots work there, and then people join them. Mainly, they are engaged in mining and various research activities. Different countries build their own bases, establish embassies, and create national symbols. 15 years after the start of colonization, the first child is born on Mars. Martian doctors now have the opportunity to observe how a newborn will develop in such conditions. Of course, they're forming their own parliament on Mars. Martian policy is aimed at maximum resource independence from Earth, as well as the development of tourism. Now, travelers pay a special tax for the development of the red planet. In the Martian hospital, a bioprinter is actively used to print necessary organs and limbs. Bioprinters will also come in handy in the restaurant business. Using them, bionic, bioprinted dishes are made from vegetables, fruit, fish, and meat. The first power plants that run on nuclear fusion are appearing on Mars. After 46 years, one of the settlements became the first to climb Olympus Mons. It's not only an extinct volcano, but also the highest point in the solar system, 26,000 meters. Work is in full swing in Mars orbit as well. There, they launched a facility to process meteorites into useful materials. Then, using them, they build critical infrastructure on Mars, like hospitals. The 56th year of colonization marks the second great transition, which heralds a multiple increase in the population of Mars. Hundreds of thousands of specialists and robotic devices finally make the red planet completely independent from Earth. The inhabitants of Mars now have their own food, their own energy from solar panels and nuclear fusion power plants, their own air and water. And one of the most important events, the first person born on Mars visits Earth. It's not easy for him to endure Earth's gravity, but a special suit makes it easier. Sounds fantastic? Maybe you're right, and we've just let our imagination run wild. But what if this could actually happen sometime in the future? Do you think we'll witness the beginning of human settlement of the red planet?